Welcome to the Knowing Me podcast. I'm Joanne, and I love to help people rewrite their lives' narratives by revisiting their past and reshaping their today. I have this journal where I write down the things that touch my heart or challenge me to more living, more loving, more God. I read through it today, and I found this quote from Chuck Colson from his book, Loving God. The real legacy of my life was my biggest failure. That I was an ex-convict. My greatest humiliation, being sent to prison, was the beginning of God's greatest use of my life. He chose the one experience in which I could not glory for His glory. The kingdom of God is a kingdom of paradox, where through the ugly defeat of the cross, a holy God is utterly glorified. Victory comes through defeat, healing through brokenness, finding self through losing self. I don't know about you, but when I read these lines, when I think about them, I begin to look at my own life and I see the failures that I've been through, the wrongs that I've committed, the sins that I've committed, and the shame that I have felt and sometimes still feel to a certain extent. Looking back is not a comfortable thing to do because even though I have changed and I am more mature now, well, hopefully, my life is a work in progress and there is still so much to be done. I have not reached the goal yet. And Paul says in Philippians chapter 3, he says, it's not as if I've acquired this. I'm still pressing towards the mark. Then as I began to reflect, I realized that what Chuck Colson says is so true. I have learned that my biggest failures were and still are to some extent relational. This is where I have failed in my life most of all. I was a victim of my fear and wanted to be loved so badly, but afraid to let anybody get close. People could use me or hurt me, but I never said anything because that was what I had grown up with. I truly believed that the way I was treated was normal. I seemed to attract or be drawn to the kind of person that just seemed to know how to use me. I lived and relived rejection in so many relationships, and I just accepted it because that is what I had learned. That is the environment that I had grown up in. It seemed that I was always on the outside looking in. It's like everybody else was in this huge bubble where they had fun and relationship, and it was like me just kind of with my hands up to this clear glass bubble like a window and looking in and going, oh, I long for that. I long to be intimate with somebody. I long to have this relationship where I can feel just free to be me. And it seemed that so many people had it and I didn't. That's not to say that my relationships were bad. It was later in life that I began to realize that I related the way I did because of the abuse that I had received throughout my life. My way of dealing with my pain had been to ignore it, to disassociate from it, and so I didn't and still don't remember much of my life. I'll never forget the day that a friend said to me, Joanne, you amaze me. Somebody just said something that hurt you, and it registers in your eye for about a half a second, and then it's like you absorb it and you just carry on. And one of the things that I've always said about my life is God made me this way, right? God made me this way that things don't bother me that much. But as I began to go to God about what this person said, and I began to realize that, how do I put this? I began to realize that everybody didn't act like that. People were hurt. People did get angry. People did cry. People did feel death. People did feel rejected. And I had this armor on my entire life. And it didn't just keep me from being hurt. It kept me from relating to others the way I really longed to relate, to enter into that relationship. Because as I mentioned, I was just so afraid of being hurt. Upon remembering these things, I was overwhelmed with shame about how I had allowed myself to be robbed of what I longed for most. These are the lies that I believed about myself. I believed that I was a failure. I didn't measure up. It always seemed like I was not quite enough or as good as the next person. And my mother told me that I would never be good enough and that no one would ever be able to love me because I didn't know how to love. And sadly, I believed that lie. I got engaged and then disengaged. I would have a great friendship with a man, then things would get serious and I would bolt. And even with women, the friendships would get to a certain point, but then I would find myself pulling back because I was so afraid of hurting them or being hurt. How that lie about hurting others came about is another story, but I felt like a failure in my way of relating, my way of being a friend even. I felt broken. I was not that person that I wanted to be or dreamed of being. I was deceiving my own self. I wanted to love, but I didn't know how to. I was confused because my heart would long to embrace somebody, but my very being would recoil at the thought of it. I felt things profoundly, but was petrified to express what was inside me. I wanted to be loved, yet when people would get close to me, I would be filled with fear that I would be hurt again. Fear that I would hurt them, fear that I would be rejected, fear that I would not measure up to what was expected of me or what I felt was expected of me. I was broken, and I was lost. Alone and not understanding me, I threw myself into my work and thought that at least they can appreciate what I do, even if they can't enjoy me. I was constantly working, saying yes to everything I was being asked and feeling more alone and isolated every day. Emptiness filled my soul, and I began to wonder, what is the point? And I started to lose hope. Thankfully, that is not the end of the story. For decades, that was who I was. But that is not who I am today, and Lord willing, it is not who I will be tomorrow. I share my story with you because I'm concerned for those that are living like I was. Those of you that appear to have it all together on the outside but are dying on the inside, or those of you whose lives are falling apart and everyone knows it. I want you to know that there's hope. Many believe that the harm done to them in the past will go away if they ignore it. It's kind of like the flu. If you just leave it, or a cold, in a few days you'll feel better, and that's it. Others believe that if they tell the whole world, then they will be fine. And in a sense, they're looking for sympathy. They're looking for somebody to say, oh, poor dear. And still others think they are justified in being angry and aggressive and defensive with everyone and everything. But it doesn't matter what you believe or you don't believe or what you do or don't do, because none of these ways of dealing with your heart or the pain or of hurt or abuse will be successful. You will end up robbing yourself of what you long for the most, relational intimacy, and you'll be just like I was. When we believe the lies that others or experience have told us, we respond to life based on these lies. The sad thing is that when we do this, we allow the past to control the present. The lies obscure the truth, and it's the truth that sets us free. And all of this robs us of our future. It is so crucial for us to tell our story. But in the telling, we need to realize that it is not just a statement of I have been hurt, or I have been abused, or me too. Because what happens so often is that in stating these things, you become a statistic, one of many. And being a statistic doesn't help with the pain and emptiness in yours and my soul. We all need to be able to tell our story to someone who will listen with understanding, compassion, and a willingness to walk with us towards healing. We need to grasp the truth that knowing is the secret ingredient for change from within. Hence the title of my podcast. It isn't until you know yourself and you look at your story that God can come in and rewrite your story and take that pain and that hurt and make it into something beautiful. And I am before you today as a person that's in the process of being healed. I have been wounded. I have been hurt. But I'm sharing with you today because of what God has done in my life and what He can do in any life that comes to Him. He says He can take everything and make everything work together for good. And that good that comes out of what He does, and then He mentions in Romans 8:28, is told us in Romans 8:29, where He says, everybody He foreknew, He predestined to be made into the image of His Son. We should never underestimate the power of knowing ourselves. The small steps that we take may seem insignificant at first, but when they are put together, they become the momentum that allows you and me to reach our desired goals. If you're listening to this and you can relate to my story because of your own experiences in this life, I invite you to take a walk with me. It is not a short walk. It is not an easy walk. Instead, it is the beginning of a journey towards freedom and healing from the past, with the promise of hope for a healthy future. This is what God offers each and every one of us, without exception. But so many of us try to do this all on our own, to try to fix our lives all on our own. And we get to this point where, in desperation, we go, isn't there more than this? And I would just ask you to consider looking to God and saying, okay, show me. Show me the truth of my life. Show me the pain of my life. And show me how you're going to take this mess that I am inside. Because many of us aren't a mess outside. People look at our lives and they applaud us. And that was what was happening to me. I was being applauded for my work and applauded for my ministry and applauded in my life. And I was dying inside. And so many die inside, but they think everything looks good on the outside, so I'm just not going to look at it. And I would challenge you to take the risk of allowing God to look inside of you, of you looking inside of you with God and letting Him touch where He wants to touch, not where you think you should be touched, but where He wants to touch. And in His touching you, He will heal you. He will, because that's His way. And so I invite you on this journey with me. I am still learning. I am still growing. I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to share my story. I'm here to challenge you to look to God and find in Him the answer for the longings that are the deep longings that are in your soul. May you find strength in the knowledge that you're not alone. God is with you, and I'm here to walk with you. I hope that you enjoyed our time together. All I would ask of you is that if you have found a little hope in what I have shared, that you would come back and join me again. And if you happen to know someone who might benefit from this podcast, share it with them. And we will see each other next time when we will be talking about the risk of living.